Malta has been inhabited since settlers from Sicily arrived around 5200 BC. Malta's location has historically given it great strategic importance as a naval base, and a succession of powers, including the Phoenicians, Romans, Moors, Normans, Sicilians, Spanish, Order of St.John, French and British, have ruled the islands. Malta became an independent state in 1964, and a republic in 1974. Since 2004 the country has been a member state of the European Union. Geology and prehistory. Malta stands on an underwater ridge that extends from North Africa to Sicily. At some time in the distant past Malta was submerged, as shown by marine fossils embedded in rock in the highest points of Malta. As the ridge was pushed up and the Strait of Gibraltar closed through tectonic activity, the sea level was lower, and Malta was on a bridge of dry land that extended between the two continents, surrounded by large lakes. Some caverns in Malta have revealed bones of elephants, hippopotami, and other large animals now found in Africa, while others have revealed animals native to Europe. Neolithic and Temple period people first arrived in Malta around 5200 BC. These first Neolithic people probably arrived from Sicily and were mainly farming and fishing communities, with some evidence of hunting activities. They apparently lived in caves and open dwellings. During the centuries that followed there is evidence of further contacts with other cultures, which left their influence on the local communities, evidenced by the pottery designs and colors. One of the most notable periods of Malta's history is the Temple period, starting around 3600 BC. The Gantia Temple in Gozo is one of the oldest freestanding buildings in the world. The name of the complex stems from the Maltese word gigant, which reflects the magnitude of the temple's size. Many of the temples are in the form of 5 semicircular rooms connected at the center. It has been suggested that these might have represented the head, arms and legs of a deity, since one of the commonest kinds of statue found in these temples is a fat woman, a symbol of fertility. The temple period lasted until about 2500 BC, at which point the civilization that raised these huge monoliths seems to have disappeared. There is much speculation about what might have happened and whether they were completely wiped out or assimilated. Bronze Age. After the Temple period came the Bronze Age. For this period there are remains of a number of settlements and villages, as well as dolmens, altar-like structures made out of very large slabs of stone. They are claimed to belong to a population certainly different from that which built the previous megalithic temples. It is presumed the population arrived from Sicily because of the similarity to the constructions found in the largest island of the Mediterranean. C. One surviving menhir, which was used to build temples, still stands at Kirkop. It is one of the few still in good condition. Among the most interesting and mysterious remnants of this era are the so-called cut ruts, as they can be seen at a place on Malta called Clapham Junction. These are pairs of parallel channels cut into the surface of the rock, and extending for considerable distances, often in an exactly straight line. Their exact use is unknown. One suggestion is that beasts of burden used to pull carts along, and these channels would guide the carts and prevent the animals from straying. The society that built these structures eventually died out, or at any rate disappeared. Antiquity. Phoenicians and Carthage. Phoenicians, possibly from Tyre, began to colonize the islands in approximately the 8th century BC as an outpost from which they expanded sea explorations and trade in the Mediterranean. Phoenician tombs have been found in Rabat, Malta, and the town of the same name on Gozo, which suggests that the main urban centers at the time were present-day Mdina on Malta and the Cittadella on Gozo. The former settlement was known as Malath, meaning safe haven, and the whole island began to be referred to by that name. The Maltese islands fell under the hegemony of Carthage in around the 6th century BC, along with most other Phoenician colonies in the western Mediterranean. By the late 4th century BC, Malta had become a trading post linking southern Italy and Sicily to Tripolitania. This resulted in the introduction of Hellenistic features in architecture and pottery. Although Malta was never a Greek colony, Hellenistic architectural features can be seen in the Punic temple at Tas-Silgana Tower in Uriak. The Greek language also began to be used in Malta, as evidenced by the bilingual Phoenician and Greek inscriptions found on the Cippi of Melkite. In the 18th century, French scholar Jean-Jacques Barthélemy deciphered the extinct Phoenician alphabet using the inscriptions on these Cippi. In 255 BC, the Romans raided Malta during the First Punic War, devastating much of the island. Roman rule. According to Latin historian Livy, the Maltese islands passed into the hands of the Romans at the start of the Second Punic War in the year 218 BC. As written by Livy, the commander of the Punic garrison on the island surrendered without resistance to Tiberius Sempronius Longus, one of the two consuls for that year, who was on his way to North Africa. The archipelago was part of the province of Sicily, but by the 1st century AD it had its own Senate and People's Assembly. By this time, both Malta and Gozo minted distinctive coins based on Roman weight measurements. In the Roman period, the Punic city of Malath became known as Melite, and it became the administrative hub of the island. Its size grew to its maximum extent, occupying the entire area of present-day Mdina and large parts of Rabat, extending to what is now the Church of St. Paul. Remains show that the city was surrounded by thick defensive walls and was also protected by a protective ditch that ran along the same line of St. Rita Street, which was built directly above it. Remains hint that a religious center with a number of temples was built on the highest part of the promontory. The remains of one impressive residence known as the Domus Romana have been excavated, revealing well-preserved Pompeian-style mosaics. This domus seems to have been the residence of a rich Roman aristocrat, and it is believed to have been built in the 1st century BC and abandoned in the 2nd century AD. The islands prospered under Roman rule, and were eventually distinguished as a municipium and a foederata civitas. Many Roman antiquities still exist, testifying to the close link between the Maltese inhabitants and Sicily. Throughout the period of Roman rule, Latin became Malta's official language, and Roman religion was introduced in the islands. Despite this, the local Punic Hellenistic culture and language is thought to have survived at least until the 1st century AD. In AD 60, the Acts of the Apostles records that St. Paul was shipwrecked on an island named Melite, which many Bible scholars and Maltese conflate with Malta. There is a tradition that the shipwreck took place on the shores of the aptly named St. Paul's Bay. Malta remained part of the Roman Empire until the early 6th century AD. The Vandals and later the Ostrogoths might have briefly occupied the islands in the 5th century, but there is no archaeological evidence to support this. Ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks have also inhabited the Maltese islands. Byzantine rule. In 533, Byzantine general Belisarius briefly landed at Malta while on his way from Sicily to North Africa, and by 535, the island was integrated into the Byzantine province of Sicily. During the Byzantine period, the main settlements remained the city of Melite on mainland Malta and the citadel on Gozo, while Marsaxlok, Marsaskala, Marsa and Exlendi are believed to have served as harbors. The relatively high quantity of Byzantine ceramics found in Malta suggests that the island might have had an important strategic role within the empire from the 6th to 8th centuries. For the late 7th century onwards, the Mediterranean was being threatened by Muslim expansion. At this point, the Byzantines probably improved the defences of Malta, as can be seen by defensive walls built around the monastery at Tas-Silg around the 8th century. The Byzantines might have also built the retrenchment which reduced Melite to 1/3 of its original size. Middle Ages, Arab period. In 870 AD, Malta was occupied by Muslims from North Africa. According to al-Himyari, Iglabids led by Halaf al-Hadim besieged the Byzantine city of Melite, which was ruled by Governor Amrose. Al-Hadim was killed in the fighting, and Sawada ibn Muhammad was sent from Sicily to continue the siege following his death. The duration of the siege is unknown, but it probably lasted for some weeks or months. After Melite fell to the invaders, the inhabitants were massacred, the city was destroyed and its churches were looted. Marble from Melite's churches was used to build the castle of Sousse. According to al-Himyari, Malta remained almost uninhabited until it was resettled in around 1048 to 1049 by a Muslim community and the slaves, who rebuilt the city of Melite as Medina, making it a finer place than it was before. Quote, however, archaeological evidence suggests that Melite Medina was already a thriving Muslim settlement by the beginning of the 11th century, so al-Himyari's account might be unreliable. In 1053–54, the Byzantines besieged Medina, but they were repelled by its defenders. Although the rule was relatively short, the Arabs left a significant impact on Malta. In addition to the language, Siculo-Arabic, cotton, oranges and lemons and many new techniques in irrigation were introduced. Some of these, like the Noria, are still used, unchanged today. Many place names in Malta date to this period. Norman Kingdom of Sicily rule between 1194 and 1530. The Kingdom of Sicily ruled the Maltese islands, and a process of full Latinization started in Malta. In 1091, Count Roger I of Sicily made an initial attempt to establish Norman rule of Malta and was greeted by the few native Christians. In 1127, his son Roger II of Sicily succeeded. This marked the gradual change from a Moorish cultural influence to a European one. In 1191, Tancred of Sicily appointed Margaritis of Brindisi the first Count of Malta. Until 1224, however, there remained a strong Muslim segment of society. After the Norman conquest, the population of the Maltese islands kept growing mainly through immigration from the north. With the exile to Malta of the entire male population of the town of Salerno in 1223, the stationing of a Norman and Sicilian garrison on Malta in 1240, and the settlement in Malta of noble families from Sicily between 1372 and 1450. As a consequence of this, one major academic study found that the contemporary males of Malta most likely originated from southern Italy, including Sicily and up to Calabria. Malta was part of the Kingdom of Sicily for nearly 440 years. During this period, Malta was sold and resold to various feudal lords and barons and was dominated successively by the rulers of Swabia, Anjou, the Crown of Aragon, the Crown of Castile and Spain. Eventually the Crown of Aragon, which then ruled Malta, joined with Castile in 1479, and Malta became part of the Spanish Empire. Malta's administration thus fell in the hands of local nobility who formed a governing body called the Università. In September 1429, Hafsid Saracens attempted to capture Malta but were repelled by the Maltese. The invaders pillaged the countryside and took about 3,000 inhabitants as slaves. Hospitaller rule. Early years. In the early 16th century, the Ottoman Empire started spreading over the region, reaching southeast Europe. The Spanish King Charles V feared that if Rome fell to the Turks, it would be the end of Christian Europe. In 1522, Suleiman I drove the Knights Hospitaller of St. John out of Rhodes. They dispersed to the commanderies in Europe, wanting to protect Rome from invasion from the south. In 1530, Charles V handed over the island to these knights. For the next 275 years, these famous Knights of Malta made the island their domain and made the Italian language official. They built towns, palaces, churches, gardens and fortifications, and embellished the island with numerous works of art and enhanced cultural heritage. The Order of the Knights of St. John was originally established to set up outposts along the route to the Holy Land, to assist pilgrims going in either direction. Owing to the many confrontations that took place, one of the main tasks was to provide medical assistance, and even today the 8-pointed cross is still in wide use in ambulances and first aid organizations. In return for the many lives they saved, the Order received many newly conquered territories that had to be defended. Together with the need to defend the pilgrims in their care, this gave rise to the strong military wing of the Knights. Over time, the Order became strong and rich. From Hospitallers first and military second, these priorities reversed, since much of the territory they covered was around the Mediterranean region. They became notable seamen. From Malta the Knights resumed the seaborne attacks of Ottoman shipping, and before long the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered a final attack on the Order. By this time the Knights had occupied the city of Birgu, which had excellent harbors to house the fleet. Also Birgu was one of the two major urban places at the time, the other most urban place being Mdina, the old capital city of Malta. The defenses around Birgu were enhanced and new fortifications built on the other point where now there is Sanglia. Also a small fort was built at the tip of the peninsula where the city of Valletta now stands and was named Fort Antelmo. Great siege on the 18th of May 1565. Suleiman the Magnificent laid siege to Malta. By the time the Ottoman fleet arrived, the Knights were as ready as they could be. First, the Ottomans attacked the newly built fort of St. Elmo, and after a whole month of fighting the fort was in rubble and the soldiers kept fighting until the Turks ended their lives. After this they started attacking Birgu and the fortifications at Sanglia, but to no gain. After a protracted siege ended on the 8th of September of the same year, which became known in history as the Great Siege, the Ottoman Empire conceded defeat as the approaching winter storms threatened to prevent them from leaving. The Ottoman Empire had expected an easy victory within weeks. They had 40,000 men arrayed against the Knights' 9,000, most of them Maltese soldiers and simple citizens bearing arms. The loss of thousands of men was very demoralizing. The Ottomans made no further significant military advances in Europe and the Sultan died a few years later. After the siege the year after, the Order started work on a new city with fortifications like no other, on the Cyprus Peninsula, which the Ottomans had used as a base during the siege. It was named Valletta after Jean Parasot de Valletta, the Grand Master who had seen the Order through its victory. Since the Ottoman Empire never attacked again, the fortifications were never put to the test, and today remain one of the best preserved fortifications of this period. Unlike other rulers of the island, the Order of St. John did not have a home country outside the island. The island became the home, so they invested in it more heavily than any other power. Besides, its members came from noble families, and had amassed considerable fortune due to the services in the route to the Holy Land. The architectural and artistic remains of this period remain among the greatest of Malta's history, especially in their prized jewel, the city of Valletta. However, as the main raison d'etre had ceased to exist, the Order's glory days were over. French occupation. Over the years, the power of the Knights declined. The reign ended in 1798 when Napoleon Bonaparte's expeditionary fleet stopped off there en route to his Egyptian expedition. Napoleon asked for safe harbor to resupply his ships, and when they refused to supply him with water, Napoleon Bonaparte sent a division to scale the hills of Valletta. Grand Master Hompesch capitulated on the 11th of June. The following day a treaty was signed by which the order handed over sovereignty of the island of Malta to the French Republic. In return, the French Republic agreed to employ all its credit at the Congress of Rastatt to procure a principality for the Grand Master, equivalent to the one he gives up. During his very short stay, Napoleon accomplished quite a number of reforms, notably the creation of a new administration with a government commission, the creation of 12 municipalities, the setting up of a public finance administration, the abolition of all feudal rights and privileges, the abolition of slavery and the granting of freedom to all Turkish slaves. On the judicial level, a family code was framed and 12 judges were nominated. Public education was organized along principles laid down by Bonaparte himself, providing for primary and secondary education. 15 primary schools were founded and the university was replaced by an école centrale, in which the HS, all very scientific in outlook, notably arithmetic and stereometry, algebra and stereotomy, geometry and astronomy, mechanics and physics, navigation, chemistry, etc. He then sailed for Egypt, leaving a substantial garrison in Malta. Since the order had also been growing unpopular with the local Maltese, the latter initially viewed the French with optimism. This illusion did not last long. Within months the French were closing convents and seizing church treasures, most notably the sword of Jean de Valletta, which is to date still exhibited in the Louvre in Paris. The Maltese people rebelled, and the French garrison of General Claude Henry Belgrand of Orbois retreated into Valletta. After several failed attempts by the locals to retake Valletta, the British were asked for their assistance. Rear Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson decided on a total blockade in 1799. The French garrison surrendered in 1800.